Welcome back to the channel. Before Dracula, before Gothic castles, cloaks, or Hollywood vampires, there was a small Serbian village where people were dying one after another, and each of them blamed the same man, a man who had already been buried. In 1725, villagers in Kisiljevo, you're gonna have to bear with me in this episode, claimed that a recently deceased farmer has returned from the grave, was visiting homes at night and strangling the living, and within just 8 days, 9 people were dead. And what happened next would become one of the earliest officially documented vampire cases in European history. When most people think of vampires, they picture fiction. Dracula, castles, fangs, capes, something theatrical and exaggerated. But long before those stories existed, fear of the undead was treated as a very real threat across parts of Eastern Europe. And one of the most chilling examples comes from a man named Petar Blagojević. This is gonna be a bad one. Petar was born in 1662 and spent most of his life as a Serbian peasant in the village of Kisiljevo, believed today to be modern Kisiljevo. By all accounts, he lived an ordinary life. No wealth, no unusual reputation, nothing about him suggested he would become part of one of history's most famous supernatural cases. That is, until his death in 1725, at around 62 years old, because not long after Petar was buried, something strange began happening in the village. Within just 8 days, 9 villagers suddenly fell ill and died. Now, death wasn't uncommon in rural villages during the 1700s. Disease moved fast. Medical understanding was limited. People often died quickly from infections we treat easily today. But what terrified the villagers wasn't just the number of deaths, it was how similar they all were. Each victim reportedly became sick only about 24 hours before dying. And as each person lay dying, they told the same story. They claimed that Petar had visited them during the night and attacked them. Some described being strangled while they slept. Others claimed that he sat on their chest, making it impossible to breathe. And whether this was sleep paralysis, disease delirium, or something else entirely, to the villagers living in the early 18th century, there was only one explanation. Petar Blagojević had become a vampire. Then, the story got even darker. Petar's widow came forward claiming her late husband had visited her as well, asking for his opanci, traditional Serbian shoes. Terrified, she fled the village soon after. Pause. So his wife saw her dead husband at the door and he was like, "Hey, can I get my shoes?" And she was like, her only reaction was to just move. There's nothing else on that incident. It's just, she thought she saw her dead husband, he asked for some shoes, she moved. I feel like there should be a stronger reaction to this. I don't know. We'll move on. Another story spread that Blagojević returned home demanding food from his son. When the son refused, villagers claimed that Petar murdered him, biting him and drinking his blood. And at this point, panic had fully taken hold. This family either has the worst luck, or the townsfolk are all fucking with them. There is no in between. I just like that one of the options here is that he's potentially telling the truth and that he saw his dead dad walk into the kitchen and was just like, "Hey, can I get some food?" And the son was like, Nah, I don't think that's a good idea." And he's like, "Well, I guess I gotta beat you to death then." What is this story? Also, who's like telling this story? Because it said he murdered him. Any bit of research I found on this just said the villagers stated this, so like, something's not connecting, if you know what I'm saying. I feel like that whole family was just getting pranked. Granted, it was a pretty fucked up prank, but that's just kind of silly. This is silly. I'll try to stay on topic, I'm so sorry. The villagers became convinced they weren't dealing with disease, coincidence, or grief. They believed they were under attack from the undead, and they decided there was only one solution. They needed to dig up Petar. Now here's where this story becomes incredibly important historically, because it did not remain folklore whispered between frightened villagers. It became documented by government officials. Digging up a corpse wasn't just culturally sensitive, it was legally risky. So the villagers demanded that a local officer named, Cameral Professor Frumbald. Alright, I definitely butchered that. For the rest of this story, that dude's name is Jonathan. Attended the exhumation along with a priest. Jonathan initially refused. He insisted he needed approval from authorities in Belgrade. The villagers did not accept that. They believed they were running out of time. Local folklore warned that vampires could wipe out entire settlements if not destroyed quickly. The villagers reportedly threatened to abandon the town entirely if nothing was done, which honestly put Jonathan in a terrible position. Because if an entire village disappears, you have political problems. If you allow them to exhume a body, you have religious and legal problems. But fear tends to win in situations like this. So Jonathan reluctantly agreed, and he documented everything he saw. When the grave was opened, Jonathan described witnessing something that deeply disturbed him. According to his written report, Petar's body showed little to no decomposition. His hair and beard appeared longer, his fingernails looked newly formed, and most disturbing of all, there was fresh blood visible around his mouth. Now today, science can explain many of these details. Skin shrinks after death, which creates the illusion that the hair and nails have grown. Gas buildup and internal pressure can push blood-like fluids from the mouth. But in 1725, those biological explanations didn't exist. To the villagers, this was undeniable proof that Petar had risen from the grave, and they demanded he be destroyed. Jonathan remained uncertain, but he allowed them to proceed. A wooden stake was driven through Petar's heart, and according to Jonathan's report, fresh blood poured from the corpse's ears and mouth when the stake was driven in, which is the detail that probably sealed the villagers' beliefs forever. Afterward, the body was burned to ashes, ensuring there would be no possible return. Just a little food for thought. Whenever they staked him in the chest and the blood shot out, there's a pretty high chance it shot out of his butthole too. In his final report, Jonathan begged authorities not to hold him responsible for allowing the ritual. He described the villagers as being completely consumed by fear, and insisted that exhumation and staking were the only way to restore order. And surprisingly, authorities never investigated further. But the story didn't end there, because Jonathan's report was published by a newspaper in Vienna, and once that happened, the story spread rapidly across Europe. Germany, France, England all became fascinated and horrified by the accounts of Eastern Europe vampire cases. And over time, these stories would inspire writers, scholars, and eventually authors like Bram Stoker. Stoker, I'm so sorry. Whose novel Dracula would permanently cement vampire mythology into global culture. Today, historians and scientists generally view the Kisiljevo incident as a combination of disease outbreak, decomposition misunderstanding, and psychological mass hysteria. But even with those explanations, the story still holds power, because it shows that fear can shape reality when people do not have answers. Imagine living in a village where neighbors are all dying one after another, all describing the same attacker, all connected to someone who was recently buried. With no modern medicine, no understanding of disease transmission, and no forensic science, how long would it take you to believe something supernatural was happening? The case of Petar Blagojević is one of the earliest cases where vampire folklore collided with official government record. And whether Petar was a misunderstood victim of disease panic, or simply a man whose death sparked collective fear, his story helped ignite Europe's most famous supernatural legend. Because sometimes monsters are not born from darkness. Sometimes they're born from fear, grief, and the human need to explain the unexplainable. And honestly, if you lived in that village in 1725, and people around you started dying, all claiming the same dead man attacked them, would you trust science, or would you reach for the wooden stake? Alright guys, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks again for watching. Also, I wanted to mention I made us a little game I'm calling Creeping Through America. It's a little self-challenge I came up with while I was filming the last couple episodes, where we are going to try to fill in an entire map of the US with unique cryptids every time a new state pops up with a new cryptid. But we're not going to repeat any, so everyone has a Bigfoot story. I'm sorry, but first one gets the stamp, no one else does, okay? That's going to make it fun and a little more difficult. I have no idea what we're going to do when we fill the map. I just think it'll be fun. Also, I'm just going to retrospectively give the badges to the last two episodes. So New York and Ohio, you've been creeped. Alright, anyway, as usual, stay curious, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.